committee meeting of the Department of Public Works Committee. I'm joined by Councilor Carney, Councilor Allen, Councilor Thompson, Councilor Rudd. My name is Michael Green. So I'll turn it over to you. Just give us an update on smart cities and new developments.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, councilors. I'm Sam Edelstein. I'm the city's chief data officer, joined by Rebecca Klossner from the planning department. Here to give an update on Syracuse Surge and smart cities generally. Syracuse Surge is our strategy for inclusive growth in the new economy. So breaking that down a bit, this is a strategy. Surge itself is not a project, but a strategy with aligned projects. So some of them we know about and I'll talk about a bit today. Others we don't know about yet, but we're excited to work with partners to identify and build them out. Surge is inclusive, and so that means that we are not focusing on one part of the city or one group of people, but getting back to the city's mission that will be a growing city that embraces diversity and creates opportunity for all. Surge fits well within that when we talk about inclusivity. Surge is about growth, so specifically focus on opportunities in the new economy. As technology improves, we know there will be new opportunities. When cars were invented and became ubiquitous, new jobs repairing those cars and maintaining roads needed to be created. When the personal computer became available, new jobs in data entry and software development were needed. And now as we look at things like autonomous vehicles, Internet of Things, and more, we need everything from data analysis to mechanics that can both hang and maintain sensors and lights. And so Surge focuses on that. There are a number of other people here today who can speak to some of the projects within Surge. So Rebecca can speak in detail on the progress of the streetlight project. We also have representatives from Syracuse University who will talk about an agreement that we'll put on the agenda, on your next agenda to consider, amongst others who can talk about different details if needed. So first for the streetlights, construction for the project has kicked off. The city is upgrading the more than 17,000 streetlights in the city, and that project began on July 1st, the actual implementation. Crews are out replacing lights right now and have already replaced more than 300 fixtures. It's probably even more than that now. And crews are starting in the southernmost part of the city and working north. We have a map online. It's at syrgov.net/LED-streetlighting.html. We can send that to you all. Which shows the different neighborhoods and the progress in those neighborhoods. And the intention is that they go from the southernmost part of the city to the northernmost part of the city. The progress and sort of ultimate completion of the project depends on the weather, but the intention is that almost all or all of the Cobra headlights, which are the lights on the wooden poles that have the metal streetlight hanging off of it, would be done by the end of the year, the calendar year, and then some final lights, including the decorative lights, would be early next year as soon as the snow clears.
Could I ask you just one quick question? You said crews, so who are the crews now? Did we have to subcontract this? This isn't NIMO doing this, right?
Right.
No, we have a contract with the New York Power Authority, and they've contracted D&M construction, electrical contracting to do this. So D&M has 3 crews working right now. They're 2-person crews. Each crew is doing about 22 lights per day at this point, and they plan to ramp up to about 6 crews.
And this was RFP'd and whatnot?
This went through NIPA, and NIPA did the RFP, the contracting.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
When do you have is there a deadline for the completion of all of them? Do you guys have that yet?
Go ahead. Sorry.
We expect we'll finish up during the next construction season in 2020. So we'll be starting as early in spring 2020 as we can and working through whatever we have left. So ideally we'll be done in summer of 2020.
The vast majority of the lights that you've seen, though, correct, will be finished by the end of this calendar year or very early next calendar year.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay. So you talked about the map. The LED fixtures do look a little bit different, and thus far, though, we've received positive feedback. I took a drive down to the valley to see some of them last week, and I think they look great. They do a really good job lighting the street itself, but the light doesn't disperse quite as much as current lights. So,
and that's by design. It's supposed to light the street and the sidewalk. We don't want to see light spilling over into people's yards.
So I think they look really good. I'm excited for them to come to my street. And so I mentioned crews will first replace the Cobra headlights, the ones on metal bars that are attached to wooden poles, and then we'll replace decorative lamps. And the expectation is by the end of the year. So that's that. In the meantime, as there are certainly streetlight outages that will continue to occur on the current lights, those calls can continue to come to the city or to National Grid. It's National Grid's responsibility to be replacing them until full ownership is taken.
With the decorative lights, are we following the same model of moving south to north?
Yes, but they will start after all of the Cobra heads have been replaced, so then they'll go back.
Next, the 2020 construction season is when we would see all the decorative lights, but I'm just asking, would it be
South to north, same, yeah,
Okay.
same thing.
So that's street lights, and we can either do questions now or later. It's your call.
That's
Yes.
We talked a lot at the beginning about policies or about capabilities related to dimming and those. So do we have policies related to that, or what's our approach?
We have not put in place policies related to dimming yet. We will be doing that later on. That'll obviously be a discussion over what's appropriate, what hours would it be appropriate. So that has yet to be determined. But there will be, those discussions will happen.
The street lighting, there is a budgeted street lighting manager position that would start in January. And so that position description is being developed, and that person would be responsible for some of that policy as well.
Okay, and then do we have a maintenance agreement in place, or how are we handling that?
We're exploring our options for what would be the best idea for maintenance. One option is for the city to put out its own maintenance contract for a private contractor to maintain the lights. The New York Power Authority is also developing a maintenance product, a maintenance option that they would take over the maintenance. So we'll explore those options, see what's most cost effective and practical for us, as well as any other ideas.
But for a light that's installed now, if it needs to be maintained, how do we handle that?
Right now, if we install the new light, if it's something we've just put in, our contract, NYPA's contractor will be responsible for maintaining that. If it's an old light that's still owned by National Grid is responsible for maintaining that. And that situation continues until National Grid only until we buy out, we officially own the system, then we would maintain those through the contractor currently working. And that contractor will be responsible until the end of the lighting project. When all the installations are done, that's when we need to have our contractor in place, a new contractor to take care of the maintenance.
So the new lights are based under warranty for a certain period of time?
I believe they have a 10-year warranty, but
Okay.
I'll get back to you on that.
So if it were to go out in 6 years, the contractor that installed them would be responsible to replace
I
it?
believe that's the case, but I will double check and make sure that I report back to you.
Other questions on lights specifically?
Yeah, the position that's going to be managing the lights, is that under DPW? And then, are they going to work? I mean, obviously they're going to mainly be housed in DPW, but are they going to be working with other departments, namely police department and things like that? I mean, do we have a plan on how that's going to work? I mean, I know you said there's not really a full description of the job, but I mean, how's that going to work? Are they actually going to be subject to the police department? Is it just strictly DPW, they answer to Commissioner Robinson, or will they also be under, I guess, Chief Buckner as well?
The current plan is to put this position within the DPW's transportation department. We have had a street lighting coordinator in the past who was our primary contact with National Grid for streetlights, and that person did work with police, with law, with whatever departments needed coordination with the street lighting.
Okay.
So the next piece that I wanted to talk about was the STEAM school. So you may know at the end of the state's legislative session, the STEAM school.
Sam, before you do the STEAM school, so the lighting, the sensor is included in the light. So the FRB, the state report, do we have ideas for what we'd do with $2 million more?
Yeah, I'll talk about that in a little bit in more detail. So the fiscal review board that was reviewing the city's finances generally, one of their recommendations was they were excited about this work and thinking about how their investment could help to build things out. So their recommendation was more focused on Wi-Fi and connectivity. We are exploring exactly what that recommendation and opportunity means so that we can apply it appropriately, but the idea would be to expand connectivity broadly, which is, you know, a major priority of what Surge is built on. So back to STEAM, at the end of the legislative session, the proposal for the STEAM school was approved to be located at the old Central High School. Right now, the status is that we're awaiting review and signature from the governor, but planning for revitalization of the building itself as well as curriculum is ongoing. Bob Andrews, who's sort of the contact on the city's part, is not here today, but he can give a lot more detail on exact status, but it's ongoing, and the intention is to get the school opened as soon as possible with full upgrades. So that's the STEAM school.
Do you know, and maybe he may have to answer this question, but since this school is going to be open to anyone in the county, is there going to be a percentage? Will the city students be the majority? How does that work?
My understanding,
60-40.
Yeah, it's 60-40 city to suburb.
Which, that's a bad one.
Just also in regard to the ratio of 60-40, and then the 40% of the students would pay the district to cover the cost of them being there from their various school districts.
And then the transportation would be on their district to pay for them to come here as well,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yep.
Which brings us to, and Sharon, Deputy Mayor, do we have contracts, or are they developing contracts with the other schools districts?
Yep. So part of the effort to garner the support from the state was initially very low-level agreements between all of the school districts. I can't remember how many there were. They were on board because they said they were losing students to New York City or Pennsylvania, and they wanted our kids to stay in our community. The idea would be there are going to be a lot of agreements around this STEAM school. The county, the school district, the city, and the various school districts.
No, I'm just, in specific, we're talking about like 400 people. So are they, right?
Students?
Yeah, it's like 1,000 students, 400, so it's 200, yeah, so it's, are we going to get the students is really what I'm asking. You know, do we have contracts so that people would say, you know, in addition to saying, yes, we will utilize this concept and we'll utilize the school, are there students in this district, like in Liverpool or Tully or wherever, that are there enough students?
Those districts have said there are enough students.
Okay.
Now, I'm sure to be able to make this business formula work, built-in flexibility that if outside districts don't have enough students, that there are plenty of students within the school district. That would all have to be worked out within the agreement.
But that's taken away from our primary high schools, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
for arts.
for
For the arts part, mainly. Yeah.
Right.
I guess to piggyback off Councilor Thompson, my concern would be, I assume that probably most districts say, oh yeah, our kids are interested, but what happens if they come through and say, okay, we only have 200 kids from the county? Does that change our agreement with the county and how everything is then financed, or is this already in place? Because I know it's based on a 60-40 breakdown, and if it becomes 80-20, does that change the agreement?
So the two separate pots. So the county's on board for the agreement to get the school built and that financing, and then the financing through SED and the money per student is another fiscal source for the operations of the building.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the district is working on what is that cost per student, what it would cost them to operate the building, and what that minimum threshold would need to be in order to operate. And all the details of that have to be in the agreements with the municipalities, the school districts, excuse me.
See, I think it's a wonderful idea. I'm fully supportive. I know that, but I've talked to some of the assembly people in the Senate, and
That's a concern of theirs.
A major
is the
concern
number.
is
Yep.
to make sure that we have
Filling the school.
these agreements so that they don't have to go back every year and ask the state for more and more when they go back and ask the state for more and more anyway, so.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I'm just worried that kids are going to come into the city and see how great it is, and the parents are just going to move in.
I have one more question about the staffing. So is it safe to say that the suburban schools, the staffing, the pay is higher?
Okay.
And so with the staffing for this school.
Chair Contreras gave our teachers a pretty decent contract the last
Okay.
time around.
So
Yep.
are we going to have problems with staffing the school as well? Do you think because we have kids coming from the county, where we have teachers that want to move in from the county and actually teach at this school, and then how would the pay be affected if they move in, not technically move in, but if they come from the county teaching and then they want to teach at this school now? Can we compete with those wages?
I can't answer that. I think we'll do some more research on those comparables. I think particularly because of the arts part of it, that's almost like a passion for teachers.
Okay.
And wanting to engage in the arts component of it. And these will be district teachers, so they will not be
Okay.
suburban teachers.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Yeah.
I believe these are all just going to be city teachers, so they're going to reallocate, maybe hire more, but they
Hire more, reallocate people. We have
the
arts
people that they
teachers
have.
all throughout the school district, and there will be city school district employees.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have all these things written down too, so I'll get more specific answers.
I've also heard the concern about the fear of a lack of demand, but I would ask what happens if there's too much demand? And I would say I would ask what's the intentionality, if there is any, around the first class of Syracuse Latin becoming high school at maybe the same time as this building is ready? And then like what happens to who gets in to the extent it becomes popular?
Nobody's from the district is here. So I would encourage another conversation as we're moving further down the line about the logistics. They're working out all those logistics now and putting plans together. So we would be well within, it would make sense to have those experts in the room.
Thank you.
Great. And so we'll get answers to those things as well, or set up more discussion specifically. So that's STEAM. Next thing that I wanted to talk about is data privacy and community engagement around this, so that we can make sure that we're doing all these things in a way that we're all comfortable. So part of having this growth strategy in the new economy is that it includes thinking about lots of different types of technology, including things like drones. I know that we've had conversations in previous committee meetings about how do we associate privacy with drones flying through the city, sensors, cameras, artificial intelligence, and more. Technologies employed within this SURGE initiative should be trustworthy, both in terms of security and privacy. And we know that SURGE places a large responsibility on the entire community, and especially on city government, when it comes to deploying technologies that are collecting data in new ways. And potentially capturing information about our residents. So that's why I'm excited to discuss an initiative that we're a part of in partnership with Syracuse University and the School of Information Studies. Last week we were at a conference in DC sponsored by the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, NIST, which has launched a thing called the Global Cities Teams Challenge, which is a collaborative platform for the development of smart cities and communities. And so we're part of what's called an action cluster, which essentially is this action cluster. It's a group of interested partners to think about how we develop a framework around thinking about decisions for using technologies in specific ways. So we may say, we want to deploy a camera in this part of the city or use a certain kind of technology in this part of the city, but we should ensure that there's some feedback mechanism from the community to make sure that we are doing something that people are comfortable with. So there may be acceptable uses for cameras or some kind of technology in one way, but not in another way, and so creating a framework to parse through those things is important. So we're right at the beginning stages of that framework, but that's a piece of the puzzle here that we think is really critical. So that we would look to start really implementing and finalizing by early fall, and then that leads into more community engagement. So understanding privacy issues means that we have to engage with the community. We know that there's a ton happening right now. Even just upgrading streetlights is a huge project, and so making sure that people understand what's happening is really important. And so in that effort, we currently have a fellow from Harvard who's pursuing her doctorate. Her name is Mojdeh Mahdavi. She's working out of our office. This is through part of our partnership with Bloomberg Philanthropies and Harvard. We were able to get her here, which we're excited about. And over the course of the summer and then ongoing, her plans and some of her actions will begin to engage some of the community or engage the community on some of these issues, both through traditional sort of community meetings like at TNT meetings, but then also one-on-one discussions. She's working with Dr. Johanna Rogers at Center State and her work within the JP Morgan Chase Advancing Cities grant. And so through these efforts, we expect that we'll be able to have productive dialogues with a wide range of the community members that can ensure that Surge's mission is met. Additionally, in discussions with Councilor Allen, thinking about additional ways to engage community, especially young people in the community, to give them ideas about where there are opportunities in the city is really critical. So we're doing our best and obviously open to suggestions specifically with your influence in specific parts of the community.
So, and maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but in terms of privacy, let me just start with the lights that we're putting up currently. And I know Wi-Fi, citywide Wi-Fi has always been on the table as something that we'd like to get to. With the lights that we're installing now, that's obviously not ready available, correct?
The data from the lights?
Yeah.
Or,
well, I assume using Wi-Fi or just the privacy and the data that we're collecting from it, is that... I've gotten a lot of questions from it just with everything that's happening with the school district. What steps are we taking to ensure that there won't be any type of abuse of that information or data that we're collecting and using and giving to other companies or organizations to use? I mean, obviously I get that that's a benefit to us, is that we're able to share that type of data, but what steps are we taking to make sure that our constituency is protected and that they're...
The first part. So the first part of your question about what are the lights doing now, they don't have Wi-Fi capacity now. That's something that would be an add-on. It is a possibility. But right now they're just functioning as street lights, and the only attachment to them is a small networked control node for purposes of scheduling and getting data on the lights' runtime and energy consumption. So then Sam can answer the rest.
Streetlight's not collecting data on anybody. It's just reporting what is happening with the streetlight. What you would expect to see as the system is more built out is that we would likely share information about how much energy each streetlight is using, both because I think just good to be transparent about that information, but it also will give good information about how much energy are we saving because we have LED lights. Also, how much are we actually using versus what we're being billed for. And so that information, part of this data privacy framework that I talked about, one of the sensors that we're considering as a piece of privacy consideration is streetlights. So it's not collecting data on people. It's collecting data on how much the streetlights are actually being used. And so the intention is that could probably be shared publicly. The second part of your question about specific security measures, Dave Proack is here from the IT department. If there's things that you'd like to share about steps that we've taken that we can share.
Afternoon. The security posture of this new street lighting network has been a concern of ours from day one. We wanted to make sure it's done right, and the activity over the last couple of weeks has really heightened that concern. So without going into a lot of details in a public forum, we're going to make sure it's done right, things are locked down, and there's no exposure of any proprietary data at all.
And to that end, the partners that we've engaged through the project, Cisco is a partner of ours on this project. They're world-leading security experts for these kind of things. So they've helped us to build out the network that helps to make the streetlights work. So.
Can you also? So Sam has also been the watchdog for us internally from the day we began this conversation. Absolutely, about our responsibility for collecting data and what we do with it. And so can you talk briefly about the group, the advisory group of individuals that you brought together for that purpose?
Absolutely, yeah. So this goes more to the framework specifically on what we've worked with the iSchool. So the idea is, so I mentioned streetlights are one thing that will be collecting data through sensors, but that is not, those sensors are not collecting data on people. There are potentially technologies that we could deploy in the city that would collect data on people. Cameras, for instance, record people while they're walking down the street. Currently, any cameras that are deployed in the city, they're used for review purposes. If there's an incident that happens in the city, we can go back and review that footage, and so there's a level of comfort with that. There are additional technologies that we could add on to those cameras that could detect who is walking down the street, and that would create additional concern. Now, there are some cities that have all out banned that kind of technology from government use. I don't know if that's the right answer. Part of the reason for building a diverse group of advisory board members to be able to say this is an appropriate use or not is to understand for the city of Syracuse what's appropriate. So we may say it's never appropriate to use facial recognition technologies in the city of Syracuse, and that's okay, and then we could do that. We could also say in the following circumstances, it is okay, and so we're going to do this, but we won't share that information publicly, or we will only share it with the following groups, or we will share it publicly because it's important for us to be really transparent about it. And so creating the right framework where it's not just me or it's not just the government who's making decisions on things, but it's a group of community members and experts in the field who can help us is part of what we're driving toward.
Yeah, I guess that was, I guess, initially my concern. Is I understand that right now we're just essentially installing these lights, making sure that they're more energy efficient, and I don't think anyone really has a big concern on us sharing how efficient it is and how much we're actually saving, because I'm sure the average person that sees that big bill that we have wants to see that that this was a good decision, that we are conserving energy and saving money. I guess my question really is more geared towards when we decide that we'd like to move forward and sort of reach out and try and take advantage of some of the other technology that would be available to us with having this installed. Are we going to come back and have discussions like this about what we're going to do, or is this simply going to be implemented and then we're just going to be told about it?
No, I mean,
I would hope that the council would, basically have our hand held and walk through each of the steps that we're going to be taking, because, we're the individuals that get called or get concerns about what policies are put in place.
I fully agree with you, and I think that's what the council is here for. So I agree. I think the couple of ways that you can kind of guarantee that would happen is we'd have to buy this stuff, so we'd have to come in and ask for approval for it. But even beyond that, I think, yeah, we absolutely have the responsibility to be talking about what we're doing when it comes to this, and so I will push for that, for sure.
Okay.
I have, are you finished?
Yeah, I'm good now.
I was in DC over the weekend, and I noticed that they have the speeding cameras. So instead of having the police officers pulling people over and giving them a ticket for speeding, they have the cameras there. And as a district counselor, I get a lot of phone calls, especially on the side streets where people are speeding up the street. So with this technology, is that something that would be possible in the years to come to be able to have that?
So we've had conversations around. I was also in DC this weekend. It was very hot. And I also was very careful to drive the right speed limit around those traffic cameras. We've talked about red light cameras and the potential. I think and Sharon, feel free to go, or anybody, feel free to go into detail. I think the question is, there are cameras that are reading license plates, and so that means that in concept you know that that person, or at least that car, was in that place, which means that someone knows something about that person that without that camera there you wouldn't necessarily know. So those are the kind of things that we would consider. But Sharon, if there's additional things.
It lends to the conversation you talked about. We were approached by a vendor. We probably met months. Actually, it was the same vendor, I believe, that approached the city under Mayor Minor in the last year of her administration. And it brought up the same concerns you're bringing up now in recognition, license plates for obvious reasons, for crime prevention reasons and resources of our staff. But we also are thinking through these other issues of how that data is used. So we have the information. The other thing is that if we went down that path, we would want to craft an RFP, craft a more global way to solicit companies that would meet the needs we're looking for in that area. But we have been approached since being here, and for the reasons you said, are very careful about whether we're going to venture down that road. And I think we need to learn more about our capacity to be able to manage data and be prepared to manage it in a way, safeguards that we want to hold in place. The technology is going to be there when we're ready for it, and that's kind of where we are with it.
Okay. Did you hear?
I would just warn your constituency that usually when I have officers sit on side streets and look for rolling through stop signs and speeding, it's usually the people that live in the neighborhood that are once getting the tickets.
Right.
And then you get the call that they're mad at you for having the officer in the neighborhood watching for them.
So the next thing that I wanted to go into, Councilor Rudd had asked before about Wi-Fi and connectivity and the FRB. When we first began talking about issues related to surge, key amongst them was connectivity. We know only about half of the households in the city have a broadband internet connection. That's not because it isn't available, it's because of the cost. In the most impoverished census tracts in the city, only about 20% of households have broadband connectivity. And I have kids in public schools, and they have homework that they need to access through computers and through internet. And so from a earliest levels of education, having access to internet is obviously critical, all the way up to applying for jobs and just sort of being able to interact with the world that we have today. So it's a piece of, if we are going to be saying that this is a vision that drives us towards growth in the new economy, then thinking about connectivity broadly is really critical here. So determining the strategy that best alleviates some of those things is really challenging. It can be expensive, and there are privacy issues that are associated with it as well, but it is critical. And so we're excited that the FRB did recommend the availability of up to $2 million to increase connectivity throughout the city, mainly through Wi-Fi. We're still exploring exactly what that means and how we can best implement it and where we can do it. But also thinking about how can we build out public-private partnerships with existing entities within the city to expand connectivity is also a part of the process. So speaking to global and national companies as well as more local companies about where there's opportunity. During the last administration, there was a report on municipal broadband options written by a company named Magellan that Dave Proack was heavily involved in. It was a great sort of first step in us understanding what are different options when we think about providing internet availability across the city. we're taking that report now and building out some additional analysis into, well, where is broadband currently and how does that line up with ability to connect, and then also sort of legally wise, where are there places that we can start to have some influence from a government perspective, from partnership with like I said, local other local companies to ensure again that people have connectivity in the way that they deserve to. So it's ongoing, but also something I'm happy to keep you updated on and involve you if you have thoughts as well. The last thing that I wanted to talk about, there's a lot of stuff. We are, so as we'd mentioned, and as Deputy Mayor had mentioned, we're collecting a lot. We are currently collecting a lot of data, and we are getting ready to collect a lot of data. And so understanding what that data actually says and creating information from that data is going to be of critical importance. It's not really all that useful to have a bunch of sensors telling us what's going on if we can't make sense of it. And to be honest, it's a lot. And so it's probably not something that internally we'll be able to manage on a day-to-day basis. Doing it all ourselves would require us to ask you all to approve a lot of new positions in-house. So one of the things that I'm really excited about, this has been an ongoing conversation for a while, and specifically in the last few months, is a partnership that we're developing with the School of Information Studies at Syracuse University. And we have Art Thomas and Sarah Weber from the iSchool here who can speak more in detail if interested. But we'll be putting a memorandum of understanding up for consideration on the next council agenda, but I'll go into a little bit of detail and happy to answer any questions as well. The purpose is to enable the city to share specific data that we're comfortable sharing with the university and students at the university, so that one, for the students' perspective, they can use real data to build out dashboards or build predictive models and things like that, that oftentimes as a student at the iSchool, I was given data that was sort of already used by a lot of different people, and so it was pretty clean and easy to use. In reality, when you're a data scientist for a city, you never have clean data that's easy to use, and so we're going to provide that hard to use data to students so that they can learn what it's like in real life context to sort of be a data analyst for a city, which hopefully prepares them for jobs locally or wherever. For our benefit, it gives us more horsepower and more people to think about these problems and work with our staff to better understand challenges that we are having and make sense of them with the data that we're collecting. So through this MOU, essentially what we would say is, Commissioner Robinson at DPW might say, I need to know the best streets to pave this upcoming year, and so where's the data that can help me make these decisions, and can we get some help on doing an analysis around that? We could then take that data, share it with the university, and they could, obviously with consultation, could help to build out a plan for where we'd be paving roads based on information. They'd take on that responsibility and then sort of hand the project back off to us to actually implement. So that's the basic, real high level of what the MOU is, but it essentially allows us to access additional resources from a people point of view. We also think that there's probably a lot of opportunity for us to pursue research grants in partnership with the university where there may be something interesting that they want to do that we could be a partner in. And so doing that, and then I think the last thing, Councilor Carney, to your point on questions around privacy and security, there are experts in data privacy and data security at the university that this helps us to it helps us to tap into the resources available there to get additional expertise that we just would never have on staff here.
Okay. To go back to the point that you made about using this technology and data for like road reconstruction or repairs, is this more capable than, I know when I first got on the council we started talking about and actually using a little bit the sensors on cars to actually go through and review where potholes out an even level. Is this is going to be more effective in theory?
It would essentially be taking that sort of data and just making even more sense out of it.
So you would take it from that, and so the cameras or the sensors, it's not going to
Whatever
actually...
it is, yeah.
I mean, is it actually like off the lights going to be, or this is just sharing?
So it wouldn't be specifically the
Sorry, I
sensor
struggle to
itself.
turn
It
on a
would be the
computer, so
data.
I'm really having a hard time wrapping my head
It would
around
be the
this.
data that comes from those sensors. So we will essentially have very, very large spreadsheets of information that are coming in constantly, whether it's from something like our GPS on all of the fleet that can tell us where potholes are, or how much energy a streetlight is using. That's just going to be sort of numbers that are coming in. And so making sense of what those numbers say. Are we doing more of it today than yesterday? Can we predict how much we might be doing next week? Those are hard problems to solve that we just currently do not have staffing levels to do. But there is quite a bit of expertise at the university that can help.
Okay. Now, in theory, would we then, I mean, I know you'd mentioned before having to, get more staff to sort of review this. How much of it is actually going to be in-house here at the city? What are we actually going to be using and partnering with the university? I mean, what are we going to need to do in theory? Like, is it going to be with the DPW? Would it be under, your department, or?
It would be a partnership amongst probably a number of departments. My department would certainly be involved in a lot of sort of helping to scope out the technical nature of some of the projects, but largely it would be a department saying we need help and we think that there's data to help solve some of these issues, or at least make more sense of them. And so then creating a scope of work to better understand it would be kind of the way forward. We piloted a few of these things, so Professor Thomas may be able to provide more insight into. He oversees a group called iConsult, which is essentially a student-run consulting group within the university that takes on projects like these. And so we've done a couple of these that he can detail if you're interested. But that would be the model that we would continue to follow.
Yes, the iConsult Collaborative is what Sam is speaking of, and I direct that. I'm the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs at the School of Information Studies. And the iConsult Collaborative has been in existence for several years. The purpose of that is to give students experience working with real situations and performing services at no charge to external organizations, and it gives them that opportunity to learn about that. Through Sam's generosity, we've had the opportunity to partake of some of the pilot projects that he's talking about, and we've hopefully rendered some good information back that typically will increase the productivity of anybody within the city in terms of some of these things. I want to make the point that the way we're designing the future of this relationship is that the city information stays with the city. We have no intention to bring information to the university unless the city desires us to do that. So that'll be entirely in your control, and we're building ways in which our students can access that information through a secured platform that is, again, permitted by the city and also permitted by the university, so that there's full controls on who can access what and what we're going to be doing with it.
So right now, though, the sensors we have are only capable of measuring the performance of the lights, right?
So currently installed with the lights, yes, there are sensors on the lights. We haven't deployed anything else specific to street lighting. That's sort of an ongoing discussion. Part of what I talked about in terms of community engagement, frameworks for privacy, we want to make sure that anything that we're deploying is people are comfortable with. So we haven't moved forward on any of it. We have ideas about where we could go, things like monitoring current infrastructure to see if streets have snow on them, or what sort of condition they are, so that we can better plow. Monitoring Onondaga Creek to see if it's flooding, so that we don't have to send staff to check and see if it's flooding. So there are ideas around that, but before we actually go forward, we want to ensure that there's buy-in from community and necessary partners.
So, but the data that the students would be reviewing would be something in the future that we don't currently have the capability, or what can they do now?
Yeah, we have a large amount of data that has nothing to do with sensors that that the city currently holds, and so some of the pilot projects that Professor Thomas was talking about have involved things like looking at code violations and building a dashboard to understand how many are open, how many are closed, which neighborhoods have more, how long is it taking to close code violations, things like that. So. When I think about smart cities and surge and sensors, this shouldn't be a separate thing that we're talking about. It should sort of just enable the functions that we currently have or that we need help sort of solving. So when we talk about streetlights, we rely on people to complain to us about where streetlights are on and off, and we know that we don't get complaints equitably across the city. So deploying sensors allows us to know without someone complaining to us if a streetlight is on or off, and so that should help us to more equitably light the city. So that is a useful way to deploy a sensor. Now, making more sense of building out dashboards to understand even more about the streetlights, that's something that we could go to iConsult and say, can you help us to make more sense of this? But it should be a natural extension of the kind of work that we're already doing, and so it's likely that we might bring in also information from our assessment department or from where we filled potholes, or I don't know what other kind of connections there would be, but that there would be layers of data that we could join together to make sense of the information generally.
And do you guys partner with other municipalities or other companies, or what's your experience in that realm?
Yes, we do have projects that have been going on with other municipalities. These are a little bit more difficult because of distances sometimes, and so we look forward to being able to work in our own community in that regard. We work heavily with other companies in terms of data interpretation and the data science, and we have specific degrees in data science as well as faculty who do research in that area. iConsult also works cross-functionally across the university, so that means that we have access to students and faculty within School of Management, within the Maxwell School of Public Policy, and so forth. And so in that sense, we're building a lot of different projects for different reasons throughout the different communities that we serve. We even have some research projects, for example, on the east side, on the south side, and so forth, that our professors are working on, and our students are helping them digest some of that data and come up with some similar conclusions.
Man with the baby?
Is smart cities a subset of the surge, or is the surge a subset of smart cities, or something different? How do you think about it?
I'm not the biggest fan of the term smart cities, so I think of surge generally as a larger vision that the city has for how we ensure that we can move forward as technology becomes more a part of the global community and the community in Syracuse generally. There are pieces of that would be considered smart cities, and so I think I would say the smart cities is a piece of surge.
So I had never heard surge described the way you described it in this meeting as this citywide initiative, and I totally agree that the smart cities elements, so the street light purchase and the sensors that go along with it, and then the data privacy of how to manage the data, and then the STEAM school, which is countywide. I agree all those are regional drivers of change. But then I've also thought of the surge as like heavily south side oriented, and a strategic decision to drive economic development and empowerment down the really like kind of what I would call like the missing gap from like the edge of downtown to the south side, so that it is like a truly economically empowered zone. And I think that's smart. I think it's a strong signal to market it. So any chance you could describe the other prongs to the surge just quickly, because I feel like the other elements are less, they may have citywide impact, which is good, but they are strategically concentrated in a geography of the city.
Yeah, so I talked about the STEAM school, which is part of a larger initiative called the Southside Campus for the New Economy, and so that includes also additional investment and build out of student EOC and other sort of related educational institutions in that area. we the build out of the tech garden as well, which was a previously identified project that is sort of under a larger umbrella of Surge. So giving more space to companies to join the tech garden, and then also the New York Center for Smart Cities, which is still sort of in a visionary and planning stage, but the idea there being that as we collect all of this information and need to make sense of it, it can give us more guidance about how we sort of manage the city generally, but additionally can provide sort of like a public-private partnership space where if you have a local company that says, I really want to test this new idea out, there's a space to test it, then also that there may be opportunity to partner with more national companies to say, the city can act as a platform, given that everything is appropriately scoped. City can act as a platform to try a new technology or a new idea, and here's the space to do it, and here's access to, again, with appropriate guidelines, city data, or local companies that want to be involved, or students that are coming from the STEAM school, going to a local university, doing more and more training, and then ultimately being employed locally because they have all the training to lead them to the jobs that are available. All that stuff is located, you're right, in that section of the city, and that was purposeful. But I think our idea is, as we talk about generally, the city is the hub for the region as a whole, and so investment in the city, and specifically investment in that part of the city, can help to grow the city and then the region generally.
So besides the STEM school, do you guys have any other plans yet? Because from my understanding, when it was first rolled out, they had identified the area, but there wasn't a specific plan yet for
school.
No, for the area of the Surge, on the south end of it, there wasn't a plan yet. And so now you have the STEM school. Are there any other plans, or has any other thing been presented that we can actually look and see, oh, okay, in this building, for instance, we're going to put this there?
Yeah.
Has any
For
of
example,
that?
the Sears building, because that was labeled something in the map of the Surge.
Right.
Yeah,
that whole corner right there.
It's a
that's
name
South Salina
within that
MLK.
Southside campus
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, so New York Center for Smart Cities, we would also probably put in that part of the city. There is not a full-on plan for a detail about what every building in that region, or any available building or potentially available building would
When you say New York Center for Smart Cities, that's sort of like the way we have the Green Air Center, the Center for Air,
Excellence.
Yeah, Center of Excellence for Air Quality. Is it that kind of thing where we would be servicing the other, because we're an early adopter, we're like the center of it? What does it really mean?
So I think not necessarily like directionally center, but more center like a research or place. Similar to the Center of Excellence, but probably a little bit more applied on a day-to-day, like also servicing municipal operation with availability for research and testing of new technologies as well. Other things?
I would just suggest that, and I'm not sure that it's not being done now, that the sensors, I know the sensors aren't doing this now, but for traffic counts, because at some point 81's going to come down.
Yes.
And just to, I mean, it just rolls to all the upgrades that need to be done on the streets, and where the streets are being torn up and whatnot. What's traffic, what's on there, or trucks on there, or, you can pick up different sensors, can pick up the size.
Absolutely.
And such,
Yes.
so.
Thank you for that. And part of the larger idea is that transportation is also a huge piece of how people thrive in this community. And so thinking about bus rapid transit and other forms of public transportation, we need to better control street light or traffic lights, and part of that is understanding how and where traffic is. Yeah.
Right.
That's great that you're saying that. I think the idea of layered investment, so the bus rapid transit, the sensors, what sensors are appropriate to the extent we have extra money, where can we do it in like the X of bus rapid transit?
Yep.
And then to the extent we ever do Wi-Fi, how can we do it near those like transit spots maybe?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So is SMTC like an active member of the I don't know, surge
Yes.
working group, I guess.
Yes, we've had ongoing discussions. They're the ones who spearheaded the BRT movement, and so we've been in active conversation. They are excited about the potential for better understanding of traffic patterns generally, and then also the need to better control traffic lights, as in sort of response for whether it's 81 and changing traffic patterns, or just generally.
So are you guys, like for instance, I'm thinking of the section and like where the old coin textile is. So buildings like that, like are you guys actually like going out and trying to attract companies here? And are you marketing like the city, like for like this is what we're doing here, like you should come and bring your business here? Like, is there a plan for that, or are you guys already doing it?
So that's a function of our ongoing business with Economic Development Office, identifying available businesses and trying to connect them with buildings and properties. And
Relative to the surge, like the technology companies, like are we doing that as well? Like trying to attract them here?
Sam has a revolving door of technology companies that are always coming in wanting to talk to us. And that is another thing that we're optimistically cautious about, because we're the city looking to go into this avenue, and everybody, as was coined, wants to take you to the prom, but you might not want to go to the prom with that person. So we're learning ourselves what we should be asking for, expecting in conversations with companies about not what they need to be invested in our city, but what our city needs for them to be invested in our city.
Okay.
I would just be curious to know, and obviously this is much further in the future, like a year out, let's say, to just sort of get like a full presentation of the data of what we're actually saving in energy costs, what we're saving in maintenance costs, because that was a big, I think a driving force behind a lot of us voting for this is not just the benefits that come along with this, but also that, to put it bluntly, I think that we're being taken advantage of by an energy company that, maybe they didn't maintain it as well as they should have, that it was at a inflated price to us, and that energy costs were inflated. So I'd just be curious to know, maybe a year out when we have a good picture of, what are the maintenance costs to us annually? What are we actually saving from, years in the past, and now that we've actually got an established, network of these LED lights, what we actually saved in a year.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And-
we'll make
and-
sure we do that.
Yes, and I would anticipate that we would be sharing that publicly anyway, so we can do a presentation, but we anticipate that you would have access to it whenever you want.
Okay.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.